simple layman language by taking one simple example. Uh, by simple figures, I will explain you. Please try to understand it thoroughly. Okay. First, basically, what is equalization and rebalancing? So the meaning of equalization and rebalancing is nothing but, so it is quite common. I told you from in the initial class when I'm teaching you technical terms in private equity, I told you we will be having first close, and if any investor wants to join, they need to join in that period only. Okay. So it's quite common. New investors will also join once the has been happened, like once first close or second close is done, right? So whenever new investors join, the fund manager or the investment manager, what he needs to do is he should bring all the profit sharing ratio of all the investors to equal ratio, right? Because new investor joins. So it is not justification, not justifiable to share the profits whenever new investor joins, like he cannot share because think about the expenses and losses, fund expenses which is shared by the old investor. So the new investor also needs to share those expenses, right? So that is the main reason the fund needs to bring the profit and loss sharing ratio to equal ratio. So how that happens? This happens through, this can be compensated by the new investor through subclose interest. Subclose interest. So by paying interest, we call it as subclose interest. Okay, so the new investor has to bring some surplus interest to compensate to the old investors. Okay, then the ratio can be equalized or rebalanced. Hope you understood the terminology, what is equalization and rebalancing. The name itself suggests equalization and rebalancing the profit and loss ratio. And subclose interest. Subclose interest is nothing but the new investor has to bring some compensations in the form of some compensation that needs to be compensated to the old investors. Okay, so let me take example below here. If you see old investors, I'm taking Trump and Bush as old investors. Okay, Trump and Bush are the old investors who has given a commitment of $1,000 and $3,000 each. Okay, now which comes to 4,000, right? So imagine that they have committed 1,000 and 3,000. So the fund is in need of 50 percentage of call notice. So it has issued a call notice of 50 percentage. Accordingly, these two investors, Trump and Bush, has contributed 50 percentage, which amounts to 500 and 1,500 respectively, which comes to 2,000. Okay. So 2,000 is the amount which these investors has contributed. So their respective ratio is individual commitment by total commitment here if you see. So 1,000 divided by 4,000. So which comes to 25 percentage and 75 percentage. Okay. Now new investor Biden wants to join into this fund and wants to share the profit and losses now. So when new investor joins, definitely the ownership ratio will definitely reduce, right? Instead of 25 percentage, it will be below 25 percentage. Instead of 75 percentage, it will be below 75 percentage. So to compensate, when he is sharing some ratio, when he is participating in the profits, then definitely he need to some compensate some subclose interest, right? Which I told you. Let us see how the subclose interest is calculated and what is the subclose interest, how much amount is the subclose interest. Okay. So if you see here, interest calculation, subclose interest calculation to be paid by the new investor to the old investors. Okay. So paid already 400, share of bidden paid by old investors already. So if you see here, the share of old investors, like out of 2,000, let us see the profit sharing ratio. So when the new investor brings 1,000 rupees as commitment, the ratio changes. So the new ratio will be individual commitment by total commitment, right? 1,000 divided by 5,000. So which comes to zero point 0.2, like 20 percentage, 60 percentage, and 20 percentage. So this 20 percentage Out of the 2000 commitment, 20 percentage which has been already paid by these old investors, right? Means 2000 into 20 percentage, which comes to $400. Okay. This $400 has been already paid by the old investors, right? So imagine, or let us consider that the interest rate is 8% that they need to compensate, that new investor needs to compensate. Okay. So 400 into 8% which comes to interest amount, subclose interest 32 they need to pay. Okay. Now, bidden to bring the below money for interest plus principal to old investors. Now, totally he need to bring this 400 principal amount and interest amount 32 also, right? So this 400 plus 32, which comes to 432. So this 432 should be shared between old investors in their old ratio. Okay. So if you see this column amount to bring including interest, they has to bring 432, which is shared in the old ratio like 108, 324 in their respective ratio. Okay. So principal adjustment out of this 108, principal adjustment will be 100. 400 should be shared in their old ratio, right? 25 is to 75, 100 minus 300, 100 and 300. So contributions after adjustment will be like 500 minus 1000, this will be 400, and 1500 minus 300, this will be 1200. So this is the contribution after adjustment. After making adjustment, this is the contribution and this is the new ratio. 20 is to 60 is to 20. So this is what subclose interest and um, equalization and rebalancing. You just go through many videos in YouTube also, you may not be able to find this how subclose interest is calculated and how equalization and rebalancing is done. So with a simple example, I try to explain this one in a layman language. So this is all about subclose interest and equalization and rebalancing. Okay. Okay friends, please click on the below button to watch my next video. Thank you. Bye bye.